my name's Austin Spain. This is my first sermon to preach, so a little nervous, but we'll get through it anyways. I'm a senior at McKinney High School, so almost in college. And over spring break this year, so two weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go to Berlin, Germany on our youth mission trip. And the Wednesday that we were there, we were at this homeless shelter helping out, just providing services to them so that they wouldn't have to be on the streets at night whenever it was like 5 degrees outside. And this man came up to two of us, and he had long black and gray hair and this long beard, old clothes. He himself looked like he was homeless. And he asked two of us to help him load a truck. And normally I'd be kind of scared about helping some random guy load a truck, but I was in Germany and I was more open to all of this. So we too went and helped him, and he knew a little bit of English, so he started telling us his story. And at first he started out by saying that in the 60s, whenever drugs had started to grow in Germany, he was a big part of it. And about 30 years ago, he had given his life to Christ, and he had become a pastor for homeless people. And so I was there kind of judging him based on his appearance. And this man was a man of God, doing God's work in Germany. And I was really convicted. God just kind of said to me, who am I to judge one of God's loved people? So today we're going to start out in Matthew 7 in verse 1. It's all about judging others. And Jesus says, to kick it off, do not judge. At first he's just telling us plain and simple, don't judge others. He isn't telling us to never judge, because there are some forms like advice that may be very beneficial to a Christian or to other people to help us grow. But he's telling us not to judge others on matters that are maybe disputable or things that God himself doesn't specifically tell us don't do. And then he continues with a warning. He tells us, or you too will be judged, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. What he's saying is that if we judge others, God's going to judge us too, and he's going to use that same measurement that we use on others. So it's basically like if I judge someone, God would be putting a new commandment on my list, and I'd have to live by that. And so whenever we get to the point of judgment, what we're doing is we're comparing ourselves to other people, and we're thinking of ourselves as better than them. Jesus tells us in this parable, beginning in verse 3, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, while all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So we become so wrapped up in our own ways that we lose sight of God and what he says is right and wrong. And whenever we do this, we basically make ourselves God in our own minds. James, the half-brother of Jesus, tells us in James 4:12, he kind of echoes this point. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? To keep from judging, we need to focus on God and realize that we're not better than anyone else sitting next to us in this room or anybody that we're going to pass on the street. We need to stop comparing ourselves to other people, because God made each and every one of us different. So it's basically like comparing apples to oranges. They're not going to be the same anyways, and there's really no need to compare. And there's no way either. So Jesus continues in verse 6 And what he's doing here is he's actually telling us about the complete opposite. Because what he's saying here is that we need to have a balance between both of these. The opposite that he talks about in verse 6 is being undiscerning. And so in verse 6 he says, "Do not give to dogs what is sacred. Do not throw away your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces." So whenever, in that time, whenever he said this, calling someone a dog or a pig was a big insult, and it was basically demoting them to the lowest social rank that you possibly could. And he was directing this to the people that were hostile to the disciples of Christ. Those people that would, if you were to give them advice or judgment, they would turn and they would, as it says here, they would turn and tear you to pieces, or they would turn and criticize you instead. Helpful advice is from God, and we need to value it as much as we do pearls, and that's basically what he's saying right there. To avoid both extremes, so to avoid judgment and being undiscerning, it's impossible without the power of God, and it's impossible just by ourselves. So the only way to accomplish this is to turn to God for spiritual healing and insight to other people and what you should say to them. In the next section, Jesus actually talks about how we can do this in prayer and how we can basically keep from both of the extremes. And Chase can come up here now and tell you more.
Amen.